Let me go to Representative Brad Wenstrup of Ohio. Brad, of course, United States Army, also sits on the Intelligence Committee and joins us this morning on 700 WLW to find out what is happening in the world right now and half world away. This seemingly out of nowhere, Brad. It's kind of a shock. We saw it building, but I think many of us didn't think Putin would do this.
Well, I think there was always a question because it's a mind that some people none of us seem to be able to get into to understand the state of mind that would want to inflict this type of harm on people that he supposedly says are his subjects, if you will, for him, but his fellow citizens. That's what he seems to be claiming, and yet he's going in and willing to kill them. Look, this is an invasion. This is an invasion, an unprovoked invasion on a sovereign country. He's been doing it since 2014. I was in Ukraine just about 6 weeks ago in December. It was very interesting. I guess it's like South Korea where you're used to that monster being right by you. And that's really what it is. I think this is a sickening thing to see taking place in this day and age. But, you know, he surrounded him through Belarus, and he took Crimea in 2014, and then he was building up on the Eastern Front. And we knew this for some time. You know, we had a call yesterday that included the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of State, Commerce, Treasury. They're all doing things now. One of the things that stood out to me, Scott, is they said the intelligence community has been spot on. They have said exactly what he was going to do, and now he's done it. Well, if that was the case, and that is what we know, why didn't we do something sooner? And so you talk about turning off the Nord Stream pipeline, which is a tremendous asset to Russia. Well, that's fine, but we had already sanctioned it before, and it was President Biden who turned it back on for them. And you had Western Europe complying with that. Now Germany's saying that they'll participate in trying to shut that down. You know, it's really a problem because all the things that we're doing now take time to have an effect. President Putin had his military and his nation prepared for this through propaganda and through all the assets that you need to go to a full-scale invasion. And now the man is even threatening, if anyone tries to interfere in any way, that he will use nuclear weapons. I mean, this is unbelievable. This is a sick individual that threatens peace throughout the entire globe.
I think what scares him most from an intelligence perspective, well, I just think from a perspective, is democracy, right? I mean, I know that sounds like it's very cliche, but that's what it is, right? Is that is a threat to him, and you know the idea that he wants to throw things back to autocracy, right? That and there's a lot of parallels between what he's doing and the invasion of Czechoslovakia, and we've talked about ad nauseum, Brad Wenstrup, but it's throwback, right? This is, hey, if we could just get those pesky democracy and representative republics to go away, things are going to be much better for us. But does he underestimate the power of the rest of the world against him?
I think he does, and I hope that he does. You know, it's bizarre to me that this human being could look himself in the mirror each day and not say, why do 30 countries around me hate me? You know, why that's NATO, right? 32 countries that say we stand together because of you and the threat that you are to our freedom and to our democracy. And it doesn't occur to him that people don't like him, yet he says, I still must be right. So there's a sickness here. And basically, I think the other countries, the Democrat-loving countries, are not trying to take over Russia. It is what it is. It's their mindset. And it is where he is, but he is seeking to expand it. He's a former KGB guy. He wants to bring back the Soviet Union. He calls it one of the biggest failures in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And he wants to get it all back at any cost. And I think it's really a shame because it's so damaging. It's so bad for humankind. But we should have been doing something more sooner. And we had resolutions in Congress and proposals to, you know, act sooner than we did. Now we're in this situation. It does look like democracy-loving countries are banding together. NATO's putting together a defense plan. But frankly, I think it should have been there sooner. And you go back to 2014 when he first went into Crimea and took that. You know, the Obama administration, they gave them blankets and MREs. That's what they gave the Ukrainians. Mm. You know, the Trump administration, they gave them tank busters and javelins and stingers. But right now, all of our trainers are gone, and we need to continue to allow these people to fight their fight. And one of the things that I took away when I was there in December is they are willing to fight. they are willing to fight, and I think it's going to be a thorn in the side of the Russians for quite some time, even though they are the dominant power for sure.
Brad Wenstrup, Representative Wenstrup, is on the show this morning. He sits on the Intelligence Committee, obviously talking about the issue of Russia and the Ukraine as the invasion, now much worse than initially thought. It's been lie after lie after lie in this thing from Putin, right? It was going to be, well, we're just going to free. This is we're on the side of freedom here. We're going to go on a peacekeeping mission, and we're just going to go to the areas where there's heavily Russian influence, where the people in Ukraine who back the Russian government, we're going to protect them from the bullies inside that country. And now it's a full-fledged war in Ukraine. It's not just that one area, it's the entire country that's getting shelled, and that in less than 24 hours.
Yeah, it's a total dupe, and I don't know that anyone really believed it on our end if you're really following his nature and his history. But that's exactly what he did, Scott. You summed it up very, very well. You know, he said, well, these are just independent areas anyway, and I'm going in on a peacekeeping mission because these independent areas that are basically Russian separatists that are fighting Ukrainians there, we're going in to protect them. And then lo and behold, nope, we're going to take the whole country. And, guess what? Any Russians that were living in Ukraine or any Russian-friendly people living in Ukraine, they could go to Russia. The door was open for them to leave and go to Russia if that's where they want to live. And if that's the government that they want. But they weren't. They were staying there. And I think the Ukrainian people are unified, and I think we need to be as well. But this, in some ways, may be having an impact that we've seen before in our country with what's called a shot heard around the world, because it certainly shows the difference between what we are and what Western Europe and the new Eastern Europe want to be, and what Russia is, and China as well. And we can't take our eyes off the ball with China.
Yesterday, President Biden addressed the country here around, I think, 1:30 or so on the nation station 700 WLW, and he laid out his plan. And it went, some say he didn't go far enough as far as, the SWIFT fund, and that is cutting off their payment system with allies and doing all that. And he's still holding that card out there. But I listened to Biden's speech yesterday, and even the reporters asking questions. He was getting absolutely grilled by reporters, and rightly so, because this has been a long time in the making. Brad Wenstrup, Congressman, it felt like appeasement yesterday. Like this is the second coming of Neville Chamberlain, for crying out loud. That, hey, listen, we trusted the Russians. Our foreign policy back when I was vice president, which he takes credit for, Obama era and foreign policies. You look at what they accomplished and what they unraveled. I don't think Putin has a respect or even a healthy fear of the Biden administration. Is that why this is happening now?
Well, I think, when you plan an operation like this, which clearly he's wanted to do for some time, he'd like to do even more, you wait for the right opportunity and when the time is right. And you saw what happened in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. He saw this president stands. And, look, this is a president that hasn't even named an ambassador to Ukraine. And he's been in for over a year. And that hasn't taken place. So that tells you something. You mentioned the SWIFT bank, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Well, that's great, but the U.S. doesn't have the ability to kick Russia out of it unilaterally. So we do need to unite around these types of things that are going to cause damage. But don't think for 1 second that Putin hasn't stockpiled all he needs to endure for quite some time. Mm-hmm. He didn't go in on a thread saying, oh, gee, I hope my supply line holds up because when we start this. And no, I've got enough supplies to do this for a long, long time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, too, is, we talk about energy. I'm looking at out the window today, and a year ago, gas prices were $1.06 less than they are today. That number is going to skyrocket here with what's happening in Ukraine. As you mentioned, they shut the Nord Stream pipeline down, and as well as the Keystone pipeline here in the United States, too. So while we have not issued any new permits to drill for oil, and drill, baby, drill, that policy in and of itself, I think Putin looked at that and said, okay, well, you know what? They're going to have an energy crisis. If you squeeze us, you're going to get squeezed just as hard. You don't have that independence you once did.
Well, let me let you in on a little secret that'll make you scratch your head even further. We import from Russia well over 500,000 barrels of crude oil and products a day. Mm-hmm. We were energy independent until this administration came in and did things like shut down Nord Stream and limited our ability to harvest energy. And now we put ourselves in this box. Is he so beholden to this idea of solar power and wind and everything else that we're going to continue to import from Russia what we need when we have it right here?
Yeah.
That's a big question. That is a big question. And so that needs to be answered, and I think there needs to be public pressure on the president about that. And, that question was asked yesterday, and the answer we got from the administration was nothing but gibberish.
Well, it didn't sound good yesterday. He didn't sound put together. It wasn't convincing, concise. It wasn't deliberate. It wasn't that stare down moment I was looking for. And I think Putin smells that weakness like a dog or a shark, right? And Biden's got to choose in a hurry between appeasement and deterrence in Ukraine. But what does that look like, though, Brad Wenstrup? Now, you have information on Intelligence Committee that you can't share with us. I understand that. But the idea of NATO here, the whole point of NATO, when we de-armed the Ukraine and said, hey, listen, you got missiles from the old Soviet Union, you've got nukes, why don't you give those up and we'll protect you? That was the agreement back post-1991, that they had nuclear arsenal. Let's get rid of these things. They sent them to Russia, of all places, to be dismantled. And the Russians said, we got you. The United States and NATO said, we got you. If anyone invades you, we'll protect you. Well, the invasion came from one of the people who said they'd protect you, and that is Russia, and no one's doing anything. That's not even on the table, and I think Putin realizes that.
Yeah, well, they made a deal, right? They gave up their nuclear arsenal and this and that on behalf of peace, and that's on. Well, so you ask, what are we going to do? Well, we're putting these sanctions in place, and like I said, time is not on our side with this. Time is not on the side of the Ukrainians with the sanctions that we're putting forth. I'm glad that we included Belarus, and that should have been the clearest signal to us. We knew that he was moving troops into Belarus, which is one of his puppets. He has a leader there that is just clearly in cahoots with Putin, and so now they got him on the north. They took Crimea in 2014 in the south, and then they just built up on their own border in the east. And when you see, it's not an exercise, when you see everyone fully supplied and stocked with all the assets you need, down to medical and abundance of supply, that's more than just an exercise. And so we knew that was coming. We knew it was going to come at some point, and it didn't really come sooner rather than later, I don't think. It looked like it was ready to happen. Maybe he wanted to wait on behalf of China to wait until after the Olympics, so it didn't interfere with their propaganda machine over there. Certainly those two nations are discussing this on a daily basis. They know, each knows what's going on and what the intent is. So we have a real problem. The world has a real problem. This isn't just the United States of America. And let's be real. It's kind of interesting that, administration is going to come out and say that this is a sovereign nation, this is an invasion, and they have the right to their borders, when this administration does not care who comes across our border. And so it's very interesting time and a lot of hypocrisy, I'm afraid. And so I think Putin senses that and sees that and says, time to go.
The great fear here, Congressman Wenstrup, is World War III. And is it Russia and China v. the world? Because it's setting up that way. China, in a speech yesterday, and I think it was one of the ministers anyway, was talking basically how, the West brought this thing on themselves, and all they're trying to do is reunite their country. China seemingly doesn't have a problem with this. Now, the more they aggress and they take over places like Kyiv and in areas, territories that had nothing to do with what initially they went into, I think that gets harder for China. But they're like Putin, right? Same thing. They'll deny. Is it a case where Russia gets half the world, China gets the other half? If this is World War III, and what chance does democracy stand if that's the case?
Well, let's hope that it's not an Axis versus Allies type of situation again. But you have to look at China, Scott, and say, look, they want to do the same thing. They want to do the same thing to Taiwan. They changed things in Hong Kong, which they weren't supposed to do. So they're on the same path. They both feel that it is their future. They both feel that it is their right. And so they're in the same boat when it comes to that. I hope we can deter it. Look, sometimes if the people speak up within your country, it can make a difference. You saw Trudeau in Canada. becoming very tyrannical with the actions that he was taking. And I think the people in Canada spoke up enough that he turned himself around. And that's a whole nother story we could talk about on another time. About
I don't know if the Russian people want this either. Now, again, it's not up to the Russian people, but they do hold a lot of sway. There's a lot more of them than there are Putin supporters. Let's put it that way.
Well, I was watching BBC last night where they were in Russia and interviewing people on the street, and they're demonstrating. They're not happy about this. Why do we want to go and start killing people? Why do we want to see our sons and daughters start coming home? And we don't want this. What are we gaining? What is the average Russian gaining from this? Absolutely nothing. This is for the ego of their leader, and I think they recognize that. But of course, they all started getting arrested too.
Yeah. You can only do so much of that, though, because eventually, you have the Russian Revolution. You have what happened in '91, and people took their country back, and here we are again. On that too, do you see this ending from an intelligence? Now, put your intelligence committee hat on for a second, Congressman Wenstrup. Is Belarus next? Do they invade Ukraine and move? Okay, now we took that. We're going to take something else.
Well, they're already in Belarus militarily, just like they have been in Crimea militarily. So I don't know that they have to change that very much, because right now they have a leader in Belarus that is all in with them. And, it's interesting, the history of Crimea, when you look at it, at one time it was occupied by Muslims, and Stalin moved them all out into Asia. And then he put pure Russians, if you will, into Crimea to occupy that land. So that's the history of Crimea.
Where does he go next?
I hope he goes home. But that's not, I don't see that happening. I do think that at least if we show our resolve with NATO, and so far we're seeing that seems to be the narrative, and we can take the moral high ground on that. We build up our troops and show that we are going to arm, especially Eastern Europe, be ready for anything that you might be thinking about coming our way. And hopefully that will contain things. But at the same time, I hope that there's a full departure from Ukraine ultimately.
You think he's just going to keep rolling, though, right? I mean, if he goes in peacekeeping duties and it becomes an attack on Ukraine as a whole, one would have to think that he's going to move into other areas and other states, for that matter, that broke away from 1991.
Well, that's his operation. That's
sure
what he does. He turns it into, well, you're being aggressive, and I'm defending my people, and I'm defending, Russia, et cetera. So when he sees a troop buildup, which is exactly what he did, but when he sees that, he will tell his people that these countries are coming to get you, and they're coming to attack us, and therefore, we need to go after them. That's the operation. That's just what he did in Ukraine.
Yeah, and that's why it's a Belarusian question, too, because, okay, you have an occupied force there, and you have favorable people in power, but still, you would think it's got to be more military, it's got to be roll more military and to completely take it over as you did to Ukraine. And you just see this thing spreading like Hitler did in 1939, right? You're going to have this wave. Is Poland next, for crying out loud? One has to look at that border and go, okay, we had, I know Trump had sent missiles to Poland. Is that enough to keep the Russians out?
I would hope so, and I think that it's going to take even more of a sign that you will not be tolerated, and the world is condemning you, and that we need that, and we need to just kick them out of in the international community. I mean, I just think that that's appropriate, and wherever
at some point, it's not. I don't think they care. I mean, look at these saying. How many more sanctions can you levy against him that's going to have an impact? You can squeeze the oligarchs, I guess, Brad Wenstrup, but at the end of the day, as you said, he's amassed a stockpile probably, and he's ready to sit it out for the long term. I got to get going. I appreciate the time, though. Representative Brad Wenstrup this morning from D.C. and the Intelligence Committee. Thanks again for checking in, Congressman. All the best.
You bet. My pleasure.